Okay, this is True News, and I'm going to do another quick podcast video scope on this subject of no longer Christian. And I just wanted to open up once again. A lot of these conversations that I've had are kind of all interrelated. I did a podcast on once saved, always saved. I did a podcast on sinless perfectionism. Some of these are really related in that they really discuss the sovereignty of God, right? They really cross into the issue of the sovereignty of God, and that's what we're going to talk about. And so this whole thing of no longer a Christian is in the headlines. And some people will be familiar with this with regard to Joshua Harris coming out saying he's no longer Christian, and now another guy who's a musician, Hillsong, I forgot the guy's name. Apparently, he's also come out as saying he's no longer Christian. But for lack of time, I want to make a number of notable comments on this. Number one, when you listen to these people talk, Joshua Harris, but mainly the other one, based on what he wrote concerning his supposed defection from Christianity, he's no longer a believer. He sounded, if I spoke to someone and I met somebody on the street, or if I knew someone personally, and actually I do know people who sound almost exactly like he does, I would never in any way or method or any kind of under any circumstance would I consider this person a Christian. Okay? He brought up issues of contradictions. He brought up issues of Christianity being just another religion. He brought up issues of how can God be judgmental and sentence people to hell. So these are all issues that either extremely ignorant or extremely new baby Christians would bring up, and the majority of cases, these are issues that non-believers use, or the world uses, to attack the Christian faith. Please excuse me, I have to check up on something. Yeah, those questions, those things that he brought up as reasons. He says he's now very happy. He feels liberated. All of that is deliberate. If you notice, there are people the people who the Bible talks about, the Christians have spoken about. He says nobody talks about these certain things, about issues and the contradictions. And I don't know what Christianity he's talking about. But the really, I have to get into the meat of this podcast, because the real reason why I started the podcast is really to really continually drill the concept of the reality, okay, that the Bible clearly states that there's no such thing as a person who was once saved who can just walk away from salvation. They can walk away from the faith. They can decide not being a believer anymore, and we can see that pretty clearly in John chapter 6. But we can't, you can't, the Bible is clear that if the person defects, if the person leaves, okay, there's no, they may have had a knowledge. They may have had something that they believed in. They may have worshiped. They may have dedicated themselves, their lives. They may have been intellectually illuminated. But it doesn't mean that what happened in John 3, as in terms of the Holy Spirit, it doesn't mean that the Holy Spirit renewed them, okay, or came and indwelt in them, okay, because God isn't in the business of raising you to life and then, taking away his spirit from you. It doesn't work that way, okay? So I made a podcast. I did a podcast on once saved, always saved, and the assurance of salvation. I don't believe in that you can lose your salvation. I believe you can lose your faith. But the question is, what exactly are you hinging your faith on? There are many people that hinge their faiths on religion. They hinge their faith on their family background, their history, their traditions. They hinge their faith on many, many different things, their upbringings, and a lot of things that could lead you down that path. But that is why the Bible talks about examining yourself. It's so important. It says examine to see if you are in the faith. That's what the Apostle Paul said. And so the warnings are all there. And so, but just by listening to the reasons that this person puts out as to why they're no longer following in the faith, mind you, a lot of these young liberal, and this guy apparently comes from a very liberalized church. That's why, to me, I was like, okay, there's no news here. Moving right along. Unfortunately, there is news. Not so much because of his apostasy, but because there are people that are always on the fence, and people that people like this drag with them and confuse them and take them along with them, kind of like the Satan dragged 1/3 of the angels to become demons later on. And this is very unfortunate. Just like the Pharisees do not allow other people to come to faith because they block them from hearing the words of truth. You see, so they won't hear in order that the Lord might provide them with saving faith. And so the truth of the matter is that this person was never saved. Just by listening to the person when they're talking, their ignorance is so dense, and that there's no two ways about it. It's obvious that when he speaks as someone who is of the world. I have people who are ardent unbelievers, people who are skeptics, who say and argue the same way that this person is verbally trying to. One second. The way this person rationalizes is the same way that I've heard people object to the things of faith. So my question is, could this guy have ever been saved with that type of thinking? If he was a true believer, at least a person with any kind of sound judgment and aptitude, they could easily confirm the questions that he seemed to trouble him, like the nature of God. Number one, the nature of God's sovereignty, the supposed contradictions that he thinks there are. I mean, how can you be then a Christian and then believe in contradictions? I don't know anyone who's got a strong faith and who believes that there are contradictions and just believe. And that's one thing that he said. He said that he believes just for the sake of believing. So, I mean, if he was doing that, then that sounds like the epitome of a follower, a person who follows. Well, I see these people going west. Why, let me follow them. It kind of like the Forrest Gump scene where the guy is just running and running and running until one day he decides to stop. By that time, he's formed a massive mob behind him. And he turns around and he goes, I think I'm going to go home now. And then somebody yells out, what do we do now? You know, and that's like my favorite scene in that movie. And it just shows that's exactly how people are. They're following people and they don't know why the hell they're following them. And it's just because everyone else is following. Or during a scene in this one movie, Lauren Hardy, one of my favorite ones, where the guy's walking around and he's got a crick in his neck and he's looking upwards, and he's starting to follow people. A mob of people are following him because they're so nosy and they're looking to see what he's looking up at the sky. What is that guy looking at? And the guy is not looking at anything. He just has a crick in his neck. Well, that's what people in the world, that's what they do when they're unbelievers. And yet this guy speaks as though he's just one of the ones in the world. Again, I ask, what was he hinging his faith on? Anyhow, that's one to think about. This is True News 16. Until next time, God bless you.